I've always believed that old houses carry more than just history, they carry memories. Walking past the grand mansions of New York, I often wonder what the walls would say if they could talk. Some of these homes are beautiful, yes, but behind the beauty lies something darker, something that refuses to leave. The silence in their halls, the cold spots that don't make sense, the shadows that appear when no one else is there, they all tell a story. Tonight, let me take you inside 5 of the most haunted mansions in New York. If you love exploring haunted places and uncovering real ghost stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our ghost hunt community. 1 Morris-Jumel Mansion, Manhattan. I still remember the day I first walked up the hill to the Morris-Jumel Mansion. It was a quiet afternoon in Manhattan, but the moment I stepped through the gates, the air felt heavier, like the place itself was holding its breath. The mansion stood tall, its white walls bright against the sky, but there was something about the silence that made me uneasy. It wasn't just another historic site, it felt alive. Inside, the rooms were perfectly preserved, each corner carrying the weight of centuries. I had read that George Washington once stayed here, and that Eliza Jumel herself had walked these halls. But knowing the history didn't prepare me for what I actually felt. In the dining room, I paused near the large portrait on the wall. At first, it was just a painting, but the longer I looked, the more it seemed like the figure's eyes were following me. I shook it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination. Still, my stomach tightened as I turned away. The guide led us upstairs, and that's when things got stranger. In one of the bedrooms, I felt a sudden cold breeze against my neck. The windows were shut, no draft anywhere, yet the chill was so sharp it made me shiver. I glanced around quickly, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the room was empty at least. That's what my eyes told me. The most unsettling moment happened near the staircase. As I rested my hand on the banister, I heard faint footsteps on the floor above us. It wasn't the sound of visitors, it was too slow, too deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. I looked at the guide, expecting them to explain, but they just smiled nervously and said, "That happens sometimes." Walking back down, I felt a sudden pull to turn around, and when I did, I swear I saw the outline of a woman at the top of the stairs. She was dressed in something dark, almost like a violet gown, her face pale and distant. I blinked, and she was gone. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. By the time I stepped outside, I was torn between awe and fear. The city noise rushed back in, almost comforting after the quiet unease of the mansion. But that image of the woman on the stairs has never left me. It wasn't just a story or a rumor, I know what I saw, and I know I wasn't imagining it. Even now, when I think about the Morris-Jumel mansion, I can feel that same chill. Some places hold more than history, they hold the people who never left. 2 Kresicher Mansion, Staten Island. The first time I saw the Kresicher Mansion, it almost looked out of place. The red brick Queen Anne-style house stood on a quiet street in Staten Island, its pointed towers rising above the trees. From a distance, it was beautiful, but the closer I walked, the heavier the air felt, as if the mansion itself was watching me arrive. The front porch creaked under my shoes. For a second, I stopped and just listened. The house was silent, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of silence. It was the type that presses down on you, making your heartbeat sound too loud. Inside, the walls carried the weight of tragedy. I had read about Edward Kresicher, the son of the wealthy brickmaker. Some say he killed himself. Others whisper that something darker happened. As I moved through the hallway, I couldn't shake the thought that his story still lingered in these rooms. In the parlor, the air was colder than outside, though the summer sun was still burning through the windows. I swear I heard a faint sigh, low and long, like someone exhaling in frustration. My chest tightened, and I turned quickly, but no one was there. The curtains swayed slightly, though there was no draft. I climbed the staircase slowly, my hand gripping the railing. Halfway up, I felt the sudden weight of dread, like I shouldn't keep going, but I did. At the top of the stairs, the floorboards groaned even under my careful steps. That's when I heard its soft footsteps echoing just ahead of me. They moved slowly, almost dragging, then stopped. I froze. The hallway was empty. One of the bedrooms upstairs had an old mirror against the wall. The glass was dusty and spotted, but when I glanced into it, I swear I caught the outline of a man standing just behind my shoulder. My stomach dropped. I spun around, but again, nothing. My own reflection looked pale, shaken, as if I was seeing myself for the first time. The worst moment came as I started to leave. Near the back staircase, I heard whispers, low voices, like two men speaking urgently, though I couldn't make out the words. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves. I stood frozen for a few seconds, waiting, listening. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the voices stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. By the time I stepped outside into the sunlight, I felt my knees shaking. The mansion looked calm again, standing tall and quiet, as if nothing had happened. But I knew what I felt inside those whispers. The cold sigh, the shadow in the mirror. Kresicher Mansion isn't just a story in a history book. It's alive in a way that unsettles you, reminding you that some tragedies don't end. They stay, hidden in the walls, waiting for someone like me to walk in and listen. 3 Roberson Mansion, Binghamton. I had always been curious about the Roberson Mansion in Binghamton. On the outside, it looked like a piece of the past preserved in stone, an elegant Italian Renaissance-style home from the early 1902. But the moment I stepped inside, I realized it was more than just a museum. It carried a strange weight, something that seemed to live in the air itself. The tour started in the main hall, and everything looked impressive. The high ceilings, the carved wood, the old paintings. But as I moved further in, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. It wasn't the other visitors. I could feel eyes on me from corners where no one stood. I remember standing near the grand staircase when the air suddenly turned cooler. I rubbed my arms, wondering if the AC had kicked in, but there were no vents nearby. That's when the guide casually mentioned that Alonzo Roberson, the original owner, was said to still walk these halls. The way she said it like it was just another fact made me shiver. In one of the upstairs rooms, I lingered a little longer while the group moved ahead. The silence was thick, almost pressing against my ears. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the faint sound of footsteps on the floor above me. Slow, steady, like someone pacing. I froze, straining to listen. The floors creaked again, but when I looked up, I realized there was no one scheduled to be upstairs at that time. The strangest moment came when I stepped into the old elevator. It was an antique, no longer used, but the door was left open for display. I leaned in to take a closer look, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw a man standing inside tall, dressed in an old-fashioned suit, his face expressionless. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, and he was gone. All that remained was the empty wooden interior. My hands were trembling as I stepped back. Later, in the corridor lined with portraits, I felt something brush past my arm. It wasn't another visitor. The hall was empty. The touch was light, almost like someone trying to guide me forward. My chest tightened as I quickened my pace, suddenly desperate to rejoin the group. When the tour ended and I stepped outside, the sunlight felt almost unreal. The noises of the city rushed back in cars, voices, life. But inside me, I carried something else. The memory of that man in the elevator, the cold air, the unseen footsteps. Roberson Mansion isn't just a museum of history. It feels like Alonzo never really left. And after walking through those halls myself, I can say with certainty, some houses remember their owners, and some owners refuse to let go. 4 Knox Mansion, Johnstown. When I first pulled up to the Knox Mansion in Johnstown, it looked like something out of a forgotten novel. The wide lawn stretched out in front, and the mansion itself stood tall, its stone walls and grand towers casting long shadows in the afternoon sun. From the outside, it was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about how silent it felt, as if the house was holding on to secrets it didn't want to share. I walked through the heavy wooden doors, and the first thing that struck me was the smell. Old wood mixed with dust and something faintly metallic, like rust. The hallways were wide, decorated with fading wallpaper and portraits of people long gone. Their eyes followed me wherever I moved, or at least it felt that way. The guide mentioned that the mansion had hidden panels and secret rooms, and immediately my curiosity grew. As we moved through the parlor, I trailed my hand along the wall, half expecting to feel something hollow. At one point, I thought I heard a faint knock from inside the wall itself. It could have been the building settling, but it made my heart race. Upstairs, the atmosphere changed. The air felt heavier, almost damp, and each step on the wooden floorboards groaned louder than it should have. In one bedroom, I stood near the window and saw a reflection in the glass that didn't belong to me. It looked like a woman, standing just behind my shoulder, her hair pinned back, her face pale. I spun around instantly, but the room was empty. My hands were shaking as I wiped the sweat off my forehead, even though the room was strangely cold. The strangest moment came in a narrow hallway leading to the attic stairs. As I walked slowly, I heard whispers soft, like two people speaking in a language I couldn't quite understand. My chest tightened. I leaned closer, straining to catch a word, but the whispers faded the moment I stepped forward, leaving only silence. That silence was worse than the voices. I didn't make it all the way to the attic. Halfway up, I felt the sudden urge to turn back, like someone was standing above me, waiting. It wasn't fear exactly, it was more like being warned. So I stopped, my heart pounding, and walked back down, trying not to look over my shoulder. When I finally stepped out into the open air again, the sunlight hit me hard, almost blinding after the dimness inside. The mansion stood there quietly, as if nothing had happened. But deep down, I knew what I felt: the whispers in the hallway, the reflection in the glass, the unseen presence on the attic stairs. Knox Mansion is more than a piece of history. It feels alive, and not in a comforting way. Standing there, I realized some houses don't just hold memories, they hold the people who refuse to be forgotten. 5. Beardsley Castle, Little Falls. Driving through the quiet roads of Little Falls, I finally saw Beardsley Castle rise up from behind the trees. At first sight, it looked like something from a fairy tale, a stone castle with turrets and ivy crawling up its walls. But the longer I stared, the less magical it felt. There was something about the silence around it, the way the building seemed to loom over the land, that made me feel uneasy before I even stepped inside. Walking through the front doors, I was struck by the mix of beauty and weight. The stone walls and arched ceilings were breathtaking, but the air was heavy, almost suffocating. This place had survived fires, deaths, and countless stories of hauntings, and I could feel every layer of that history pressing down on me. I started in the main dining hall, where the chandeliers hung low and the light flickered against the stone. For a moment, I thought I heard laughter, soft, distant, like people sharing a meal long ago. The sound faded as quickly as it came, leaving only the echo of my own footsteps. I couldn't help but look over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be standing behind me. In one of the side rooms, I lingered near an old fireplace. As I touched the stone, I felt a sudden chill run through my arm, so cold it made my fingers ache. I pulled back instantly, my heart pounding. Just then, I thought I saw a shadow move across the far wall, slow, human-shaped, but when I blinked, it was gone. The basement was the hardest part. The guide warned us it could feel different down there, but nothing prepared me for the darkness that seemed to swallow the air. The stone steps creaked under my weight, and with every step, the air grew colder. At the bottom, I heard what sounded like footsteps moving across the room, though no one else had come down yet. My chest tightened as I held my breath, listening. The steps stopped, and then came a faint whisper so close it felt like it brushed my ear. I stumbled back toward the stairs, desperate to escape the darkness. When I finally returned to the main hall, the light felt almost unreal, like I had just climbed out of another world. But the uneasiness stayed with me. Even as I left the castle and stepped back into the evening air, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't been alone in those rooms. Beardsley Castle is beautiful, yes, but it's also restless. Standing there, I realized this wasn't just a place for weddings or dinners. It was a place where the past still lingers, where voices and shadows refuse to fade. And once you've been inside, those memories don't leave you. They follow you, quietly, long after you've walked away.